Today we are checking out Twin Towers attack 11th September 2001. I was basically like 3 years old back then. I have seen movies and stuff made of this, but I've never actually how can I say, seen documentaries or things of this being explained in a better context than showing on movies and stuff like that. So here we got this is from the BBC channel, I'm assuming, BBC 6 o'clock news. So yeah, let's check this one out, guys.
This is BBC One.
So basically
Now,
watching the
BBC
news now.
with Hugh Edwards. It's 6 o'clock.
America is pounded in the world's biggest terrorist attack. Thousands are feared dead after New York and Washington have been hit.
That's a real life
Hijacked
scenes
planes
there,
crash
bro.
into and destroy the towers of the World Trade Center. The Pentagon is another target. The White House has now been evacuated. Nationwide panic as Americans try to understand the scale of today's events.
Wow. Could just imagine what went through all that people's minds, bro, when this all happened at that time.
Good evening. The United States was hit today by the biggest wave of terrorist attacks ever seen. Thousands of people could be dead after several hijacked passenger planes crashed into targets in New York, in Washington, and possibly in Pennsylvania. Today's bewildering event started just 4 hours ago when the twin towers of the World Trade Center were hit by 2 aircraft. Both of the massive towers have now collapsed. The Pentagon in Washington was hit, and all major buildings have been evacuated, including the White House. The FBI believes the attacks were all suicide missions, and several passenger planes are still unaccounted for. There's no word yet on who might be behind the world's biggest terrorist onslaught.
Yo, so this is...
As you can imagine, the chaos there is terrifying. We'll have live reports shortly, but first our correspondent David Loyne on what's happened so far today.
Yo, this time this was live.
It came out of the clear blue sky on a mild fall morning in Manhattan. At first, no one knew what had happened. Could it have been an accident? Surely nobody would fly into the twin towers of the World Trade Center on purpose.
Wow.
But 8 minutes after those first pictures, the full startling reality of what was going on became clear.
Yo, this is not no movie, bro. This is
you can
real.
see a Boeing 767, a passenger plane, crashing into the South Tower. A BBC correspondent, Stephen Evans, was on the ground floor of the World Trade Center when it happened.
I was on the ground floor of the building, sitting in a chair, waiting for somebody to turn up, as you do. There was a huge bang. It felt to me like somebody dropped a skip full of rubbish, a great container full of rubbish from a very great height.
One of the
At
news
which point,
people was there.
smoke appeared everywhere, as though a mist had suddenly settled on the building. We all streamed out, some people running, some people crying, nobody really screaming, across the road. And you look up, and you could see the top of one of the towers, smoke billowing out from it.
It is hard to imagine what must have been going through the minds of people on the streets below.
Yo.
There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out. And
This is real, bro. This ain't a movie.
side of the building.
This
and there was
really
smoke
happened.
everywhere. People are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows. I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
Yo.
President Bush was visiting a school in Florida.
Oh, that was the president
Ordered
at
that
that
the
time.
full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
But it wasn't over, not by a long way.
Yo.
Almost as soon as the president had finished speaking, another airliner crashed on or near the Pentagon, the headquarters of the American Defense Department.
So I always thought that it was only on this building specifically. There was another one separate from this. That's crazy.
causing panic in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. The White House was evacuated, and there was what looked like an attack on the State Department, which runs American foreign policy.
Wow.
Back in New York, firefighters were in the basement of the World Trade Center, wondering if the building above them was safe. But the nightmare went on and on. And it was all
Yo.
live on American television. First, one of the towers collapsed.
Thanks very much.
Fully collapsed.
The whole side has
The
collapsed.
whole building has collapsed.
Wow.
The building has
The
collapsed.
building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking about.
Exactly. The second building. that we
You
witnessed
imagine all the people that lost their...
The emergency services had cleared an area around the towers, but they'd not yet succeeded in evacuating the building. The people still inside had seen the other tower go and waved in desperation, but it was too late. And then the World Trade Center, proud symbol that it was of the wealthiest city in the world, was no more.
So the other building also with that other people that was waving. Wow. This is probably one of the saddest days in America,
At
bro.
that time of the morning, there would have been about 10,000 people in each tower of the World Trade Center and thousands more in the Wall Street financial district around it. The emergency services have been doing what they can all day, but they are overwhelmed by demand in an atmosphere of terror. Every airliner in the air across America was ordered to land at the nearest airport. A plane crashed in Pittsburgh. As smoke blew across
Whoa.
Capitol Hill, the heart of American democracy, it is clear that this is the biggest attack on America since Pearl Harbor.
Once again, we
Pearl
see
Harbor.
terrorism. We see terrorists, people who don't believe in democracy, people who believe that with the destruction of buildings, with the
Whoa.
murder of people, they can somehow achieve a political purpose. They can destroy buildings, they can kill people, and we will be saddened by this tragedy, but they will never be allowed to kill.
But if you take some other people's lives, that will never cross. You can never cross a message like that, bro. There is no way to convey a message by doing such a sinister act. Wow.
The spirit of democracy. They cannot destroy our society. They cannot destroy our belief in the democratic way.
In a brief break in the day, firefighters could embrace each other, but it will be many hours before their work is done, and many years before the full story of what this day means is told. David Loyne, BBC News.
And on that, I thought the news would go so as this guy explained now, that only a few years after the full story actually came out. Wow.
Well, let's go live to Washington, and our correspondent there is Robert Watson. Rob, I know it's just 4 hours after this dreadful series of events took place, but what's the latest there this evening?
Well, the latest is that if this attack was designed to bring the United States to a halt, to bring the nation's capital to a halt, then it certainly succeeded. I've seen with my own eyes the city come to a complete standstill.
Wow.
All of the federal government buildings have been evacuated, including the White House. Now, you can probably see behind me to my left, the Pentagon is still on fire. There are said to be many casualties, almost certainly fatalities. Part of the building has collapsed. All around me, the streets have come to are at gridlock as people emptied out of buildings. They can't leave the city. All commercial airlines have been grounded. The US borders have been shut. This is a scene of absolute chaos and devastation.
Wow.
Rob, we heard from President Bush earlier on saying that all resources will be diverted to try to find those responsible. Is there any word so far from official sources there as to what their thinking might be?
Absolutely not, and I think it's fair to say that they are completely stunned by this attack, as indeed are all the Americans that I've come across. And you need to understand that there are thousands of people in the streets here in Washington, D.C. Nobody, of course, is talking about...
If someone is watching this and went through this, or if you have a story or anything about this, please comment down below. I would really love to hear from your side, bro. Like, yeah, from an American's perspective. Please, guys.
Anything other than these attacks. But I think that the security forces were completely blindsided by these attacks. And I think that at the moment, the US government is in some sort of disarray because, as I was mentioning, a lot of buildings have been evacuated. The CIA has been evacuated. The FBI, they are just scrambling at the moment to deal with the devastation. And I think there's some way from finding out who did this and, as George W. Bush has promised, hunting them down and then punishing them.
Robert Watson, thank you very much indeed. Now, in just 4 hours, the United States has been under sustained attack, as we were mentioning. The first news of today's attacks came through at 2 minutes to 2. That's British time, of course. Fergus Walsh is with me here to talk us through the sequence of events so far today. Fergus.
Well, Hugh, let's look at how the events of today unfolded. It began in Boston when 2 passenger aircraft were hijacked by terrorists. These were United Flight 175 and American Airlines Flight 11, both bound for Los Angeles. They were forced to fly to the World Trade Center in New York. A third plane was hijacked at Washington Dulles Airport. That was American Airlines Flight 77, again bound for Los Angeles. It was flown to the Pentagon in Washington. A fourth aircraft, United Airlines Flight 93, from Newark to San Francisco, crashed southeast of Pittsburgh. Now, the World Trade Center in New York was the 4th tallest building complex in the world, 1,350 feet high. The Twin Towers dominated the skyline of Lower Manhattan. The first impact was just before 9 a.m. New York time, 2 p.m. here. The hijacked aircraft crashed into the 80th floor of the North Tower, each tower being 110 stories high. Now, 8 minutes later, a second plane crashed into the South Tower around the 65th floor. Now, the World Trade Center is the largest commercial complex in the world. It's effectively a mini city. 50,000 people work inside. It has 90,000 visitors every day.
Wow.
The casualties inside and on the ground are unknown. What we do know is that American and United Airlines say the 4 aircraft involved had a total of 266 passengers and crew on board. Now, within an hour, the Twin Towers had collapsed. Now, unlike most conventional skyscrapers, which have lots of interior columns to give strength to the building, the exterior walls of the World Trade Center bore most of the load, so the direct attacks were enough to weaken the buildings and lead to their collapse. Now, let's turn to Washington. Within 45 minutes of the attacks on the World Trade Center, another hijacked plane had crashed in a direct hit on the Pentagon. One side of the 5-sided building was completely destroyed. Just over 30 minutes later, a car bomb exploded outside the State Department. Again, there's no figure on casualties. American fighters are now patrolling the skies above New York, Washington, and other key locations to guard against further attacks. American military and government buildings across the world are on high alert. Other tall buildings in the US, such as the Sears Tower in Chicago, have been evacuated. America's day of horror is still unfolding. Here.
So that time, didn't they like have allies like to help them? Like, what do you call this BRICS thing? Is it? Or isn't? No, that's not BRIC Unite. No, but something like that. Don't they? Didn't they have back then? Like countries that can help in situations like that.
Indeed it is, Fergus. Thanks very much. And amid the chaos, the FBI and its international partners are already trying to work out who could be capable of planning attacks on this scale. Very few groups are thought to have the capability needed, and the Saudi rebel Osama bin Laden is one. He's currently in Afghanistan, where the Taliban claimed today that he was not capable of an attack of this size. But according to Islamic Jihad, the attacks were a consequence of United States policy in the Middle East. James Robbins now on the search for the guilty men.
So they already knew that this guy could be like the suspect, number one.
In the Arab quarter of Jerusalem, they're celebrating the massacre and mayhem in the United States. What's a disaster to much of the world is seen
UAE
as a triumph by some. It's evidence of how much hatred has already been refueled by this disaster. Now American intelligence, which missed stopping the attacks, will desperately be searching for the culprits. And to find who's behind it, they'll first ask, how was it done?
I think it's almost impossible to believe that a hijacker could convince
Wow.
domestic airline pilot to commit suicide by flying into the World Trade Center. I have absolutely no doubt at all they had trained pilots. We know in the past that they've had pilots who have been perfectly capable of flying aircraft, and this can only be the only, I think, answer to this. American pilots would not do this, but Arab fundamentalists may well be prepared to.
Number one suspect has got to be this man, Osama bin Laden, the richest and possibly the most ruthless terrorist in the world. Bin Laden has declared the destruction of the United States his top priority. He heads and pays for an extraordinary international...
And like, why was this hatred? Why was there so much hatred towards the United States back then? What did the United States do to him or his country, bro? Yo, this is interesting. I have to find out.
Network of Islamic militants. And this evening, Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Barak told the BBC he thinks bin Laden is probably to blame.
Most probably a bin Laden-like organization, but I cannot say that I'm sure of it. But anyhow, it's an attack against our whole civilization, not just against the Americans. And I believe that this is the time to deploy to tackle this challenge head-on.
So what do you suggest that America and her allies do?
I believe that the whole leading kind of group of nations in the world, led by the United States, the UK, the European Union, and Russia, which is deeply understand the need to struggle against terror, will coordinate a globally concerted effort, diplomatic, operational, intelligence, and even economic.
Wow.
Whatever the response, Osama bin Laden is already accused by the United States of bombing 2 of its embassies in Africa in 1998. 224 people were killed, including 12 Americans.
Wow.
3 months.
This guy's already been causing havoc in other countries where the United States like have an embassy type of thing. I don't know what's the embassy called. Like, what does it mean by embassy?
Now, since 4 Islamic extremists were convicted of those bombings by a court sitting in New York. Osama bin Laden was named by American federal prosecutors as the mastermind of these killings and a string of other attacks. Bin Laden is also suspected of involvement in this previous attack on today's major target, the World Trade Center.
Wow.
This bombing in 1993 killed 6 people and blew a 60-foot hole through 4 basement levels of the building.
Yo.
This evening, many Palestinian and other Islamic militant organizations are distancing themselves from today's attacks. Perhaps they're fearful of American retaliation. A leading Middle East analyst in Britain hopes the blame won't fall on the entire Arab world.
It will stigmatize many, many innocent people, law-abiding people who have settled in...
And I think that's where the stigma came of Middle East people, bro. That's where it all started.
But what can states do? You've got to be practical.
Before today, the worst terrorist attack inside the United States was the Oklahoma bombing of 1995. And it was an American, Timothy McVeigh, who was convicted and executed for that mass killing. But tonight, nobody seriously believes Americans have been killing their own. And the mastermind for these latest attacks is being sought outside America's borders. James Robbins, BBC News.
Crazy. Crazy. I don't know what video to check out after this, bro. That is so intense. The amount of people that lost their lives in that time. Wow. I don't know what to say. I'm gonna end the video. I have to end the video right here. I always was watching movies and stuff, but that's in a movie type of vibe. I haven't like watched documentaries. But yeah.